I served with the Army Medical Services with predominantly 205 Field Hospital, and we deployed to Afghanistan in 2010, and then I went in 2013 again to Afghanistan, to the Field Hospital in Bastion, what we call the Role 3 out there. So guilt is something that you wouldn't necessarily think would be an issue. You'd been out and you'd been serving your country and you'd been doing your job. What did you have to feel guilty about? Particularly when you're working in a medical scenario, you're helping people, you're doing everything you can, but guilt played a huge part in my mental health deterioration. Essentially, when I look back, I realised that I wasn't able to sequence the events. So a casualty would come in and I wouldn't necessarily have any contact with them. It had been adrenaline surge right up to the moment they came into the hospital, and then I passed them over. And I didn't necessarily know what happened to them. There were so many casualties coming in. How did you remember who was who when they were just a zap number? Or, they weren't really a person, so to speak. They were, but they weren't, because there were so many you couldn't, and they all seemed to merge into one. A friend of mine said, Rebecca, you've got to talk to your husband about it. Rebecca, you need to go and get help. And that was a friend of mine who had moved away at that time, and we still kept in touch, and he was really, really supportive. When I actually went and had a consultation with one of the combat stress nurses in Inverness, with my first consultation, she suggested that she thought I had PTSD, and that shocked me so much. I can remember thinking, what? Me? PTSD? And it hadn't even resonated when I'd asked for help that was the type of condition I was looking at. I just knew there was something wrong. I wasn't coping. I wasn't managing. I wasn't able to focus. I couldn't concentrate on anything. I was spacing out of the world. People would be talking to me and I wasn't hearing what they were saying. I would be having panic attacks. People didn't know I was having panic attacks, but I knew I was having panic attacks. And all of these things started to escalate, and I was withdrawn. I was not going to things. I would say I would go and then not go. I was avoiding other people, and I was just existing. And I realised it was getting worse and worse, until a point where I was just bursting into tears at the slightest thing. Anger, frustration at silly little things that normally wouldn't perhaps be a problem. So many issues, and they got bigger and bigger, and it's almost like a snowball effect, until I snowballed into that door at Combat Stress, and she said that to me, and then the whole process started to sort of even out a little bit, and I started to get help. So triggers for me, things that which other people wouldn't realise. When you're talking about someone who perhaps was on the ground dealing with the most awful situations, life and death. I was working in an air-conditioned field hospital. What could possibly trigger me? Casualty, Holby City, going to the supermarket, the white clinical lights in the supermarket, going into buy a new TV, again, this big sort of white building, and I would feel sick and I would feel overwhelmed, like I had to get out of there, and I hated it. Buying a fridge, being in the car. The first time it happened to me was the emergency services were obviously wanting to overtake me, and I had a panic attack. It was an ambulance, it was a siren, and it took me right back, and it was, why am I feeling like this? And all of the adrenaline surge, and every time that would happen to me, whenever I heard an ambulance or someone had an incident that needed dealing with, I couldn't watch the news for a long time, because at the time we were having terrorist attacks. I think there was the Manchester Arena bombings, there was the incident on the bridge in London. I remember watching that, and I had to leave work. I didn't tell them why, I just said I had to go. I couldn't cope. I couldn't focus on anything. What was important to me was knowing that the people on the bridge were okay. When I went to combat stress, I was in a group of individuals who were all on a similar programme to me, and we became great friends, and we still message each other to this day. So if someone's having a particularly bad time, then we will message or support each other. And I think that the camaraderie of the other guys there was a huge factor. The fact that we're all going through something very similar and had to share our experiences to a degree, but the therapy as well. It was part of a bigger solution. There were so many different things there that helped. Everybody has something that clicks with them, and for me it was the art. Don't be scared. Ring. Ring and ask for help. And don't be scared about what the future's going to bring, because it will get better. I think had it not been for combat stress, I don't know where I'd be now. I wanted to end my life. I was driving with the army for hours and hours at a time, and all I could think about was driving into a wall or crashing so that I could end the misery that I was experiencing. The only thing that stopped me doing that was my children. So, yeah, it saved my life really. Yeah.